All right, fraud fighters, welcome to the next session titled Fraud Fighters Account Takeover Edition. We're really glad that you're here. A couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, my name is Chris Worley, head of marketing here at Unit 21. Wanted to let you all know that this session is being recorded and will be available here on this page immediately after the session concludes. So if you want to share this with anybody, you can just send them the link, or if there's something you missed, you want to come back, you can come back as many times as you want. Additionally, because these sessions are 30 minutes, we won't have a dedicated Q&A at the end, but we do have a Q&A that's open and available through chat. So you see that Q&A button on the right side of your screen, go ahead and smash that and send in your questions. We'll have Unit 21 folks on the line here to answer questions throughout the chat. And I know both of the Alexes are going to try to answer questions as well. So with that, and without any further ado, it is my very distinct pleasure to introduce Alex from Unit 21.
Thank you so much, Chris. Hi, folks. I hope you're enjoying your virtual summit so far. I know it's a lot of awesome content, but I think we have something special for you in the next 30 minutes as well. My name is Alex Faivusovich. I'm the head of fraud risk here at Unit 21, fraud prevention practitioner for the past 15 years. I started in fraud operation analytics, was leading team of fraud analysts, eventually turned into consulting, worked with the biggest banks in the United States, build my own fraud strategy programs at different fintechs. And today I'm heading the fraud and risk department here at Unit 21. I'm very happy to be here. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Chris and Alex, and all of Unit 21 for having me. Hi, my name is Alexander Hall. I'm the founder of Dispute Defense Consulting, where I work with organizations to help them develop fraud strategies, improve program performance, train, and other things. I have 17 years of total experience. 10 of those years were spent on the other side. I was a fraudster. During that time, I specialized in the development of new fraud methods and found myself specializing further in the use of identity information. In 2017, when my daughter was born, I decided to use my skills for good. And that's when I came over to the fraud prevention side. I got a job as a fraud analyst, quickly became the head of fraud. And then in March of 2020, I opened up Dispute Defense. And since then, I've been working with solution providers, merchants, marketplaces, financial institutions across the board to help them improve the efficiency of their fraud prevention programs.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I couldn't ask for a better co-host for this topic of account takeover. I think the insights that you're about to share with our audience are priceless. So let's jump right into it. I mean, account takeovers, and I'll have to admit, I'm coming a bit loaded to that topic. And I tell you why. For me, as a person who worked at financial institutions, who did the operational work, who did the analytics, I see the landscape and I don't like it. Because if you think about it, fraud prevention, fraud monitoring started somewhere, let's say, late 80s, right? Digital banking started to bloom around 2006, 2007 with the introduction of the first smart mobile phones, probably peaked around 2013. But the tools that we use to detect account takeovers, which started as a result of digital banking, are the same tools we were using to monitor transactions back in the 80s. And I really don't like that. And even in 2024, speaking to financial institutions today, I find many financial institutions using the same approach, the same tools that they used for the past 30 years to detect account takeovers. And this has to change, because in my opinion, we were trained as professionals always to monitor a transaction, figure out if it wasn't the customer who did the transaction, if he's a victim of fraud, freeze the account, take actions, whatever the policy dictates, make sure the customer is safe. With account takeovers, it's a completely different breed. And I want to dive into it. So one major problem I see in banks today is that when they see account takeover from the banking eyes, from the banking perspective, they fail to realize that if an account takeover is already happening, their end user, their customer, has already been compromised a long time ago. Alex, would you like to share maybe some thoughts on, in your opinion, how taken over an identity? What is the kill chain? How this process starts, and at what point the fraudsters say, okay, I see that this victim or this asset of mine has an account with a certain bank, maybe I should take over it.
Sure. So you actually made two really good points there that I want to reinforce for a second. Is you said that the majority of fraud prevention and focus has been on the transaction, on the payment, and from that we reverse engineer where something has or hasn't happened, and then from there we change our approach. And I think that's a very important part of the conversation, especially when we talk about ATOs, because an ATO, an account takeover, is simply taking over an account. The options from there become limitless. Any way that a user can interact with the platform becomes available to the fraudster. So I think that's something I wanted to really, really drill down on. And then two is the viability of the profiles that are being taken over, and then the accounts that are ultimately being taken over. So yeah, so directly to answer your question, during my time on the other side, the way that I would qualify, the process that I would qualify what I called profiles. So these are like identities. The way that I would qualify a profile is based on what they have in an account, what their social media presence look like, whether or not they look like they're viable, like they have a lot of money available to them, maybe a lot of credit available to them, they're well standing, they're in good standing with the credit bureaus, and so on. From that, I would say, okay, here is a group of low credit viability or low financial viability, and I would set that into one stack. And then I would set the others based on what I could learn online, I would say these ones seem to have high viability, and I'd set those into another stack. Based on that, my tactics would change, right? And so from there, let's say that the methods go, there are several ATOs that exist, but that's how I would initially separate the two. Which ones look to have value, which ones don't. And the thing that I learned over time was even the profiles that had less obvious value were still valuable to me. And I'm sure we're going to get into that in a little bit. So that's how I would qualify. Stack it, research, leverage things like Facebook, leverage things like Twitter and Instagram, look at their lifestyles and see which accounts seem to be the most valuable.
That's a wonderful insight. And you mentioned the word viability a couple of times, which I never hear in the banking space. And I wonder why everybody struggles with ATO. I think it's important for people who do fraud ops or people who are responsible for designing those programs who need to detect account takeovers. They have to look at their customers, not as a potential victims. They have to look at those customers as an asset. So if this person has checking accounts, savings accounts, whatever you provide as a product, it comes up to X amount of money, X amount of ROI for the fraudster. And if you don't look at the account as a holistic asset, it's very challenging for you to understand, okay, there's been an account takeover, and now there is a process where the fraudsters start draining slowly or fast the money out of the account. It's almost impossible for you to detect that this account has been taken over and it's not the true owner who owns the account. Alex, in your opinion, how banks can better understand this asset approach? So if I have, let's say I'm banking the ultra rich people, right, who are usually targets for those account takeovers, because nobody wants to take an account where $50 on the balance. You want to take an account with that holds a high value. How banks should understand what an asset is when a fraudsters try to start draining the account? What is the thought process of you taking money out of the account as a fraudster?
Sure. So you raise another really good point. Identities are assets. And so I think it's important to draw the distinction between a payment instrument as an asset and an identity as an asset. And I think that is what's missing in a lot of the conversations. A lot of people believe that this shift from payment fraud over into identity related fraud is just more of the same, when in reality, it really isn't. It's a whole new evolution. So when we think about payment instruments that are being compromised, you think about a a card or a check, and it's only worth what they can get through on any particular transaction. And in that setting, we have financial institutions that are monitoring the transactions of the account that the funds are coming from, but we also have merchants who have a lot of firepower aimed at the checkout. And so if you get a $50 million card, a card that's linked to a $50 million account, that card isn't worth $50 million. I learned that quickly when I was on the other side. It's worth what you can get to go through one of these merchants. Okay, let's shift gears and move over as we identify identities in the hands of a fraudster as an asset. And what that opens up to is exactly what you said. Every new bank account at a new fintech, at a new bank account, at a new bank, at an iGaming platform where funds can be deposited over time, quickly, slowly, whatever it might be. A new investment portfolios. That's another bucket for fraudsters to put funds into, wait until they age and withdraw. They're all stolen funds. Let's go ahead and look at establishing connections between off-platform, we'll call it third-party platforms like your fintechs. I won't name anybody specifically, but linking them and then exchanging funds between them, establishing the wire transfers. When you get into a target account that's well-funded and you add an authorized user and you send out a secondary card, all of these options become possible. And if only thing we're looking at is the transactions, we're missing out on a truckload of the use cases that I have personal experience interacting with, and we're walking around in a pitch black room with a flashlight. It's the ROI for identity information is orders of magnitude more than a compromised payment instrument. That's what I would definitely want to draw here.
Absolutely. And I think I think that's what people really don't realize, because in 10-15 years ago, we were dealing with compromised payments, right? Somebody got a list of credit cards, sell them on the dark web, amazing. Whatever the fraudsters can take with unauthorized transactions, that's what they can take. When you get an identity and you start leveraging it fully, it almost limitless, right? I mean, the true potential is you can probably buy a car, maybe buy a house, who knows, right? With using that identity, taking out loans with that identity. So it's almost no limits. And I really like what you said about leveraging third-party platform, that you not only taking over an account of an existing identity, you use this identity to open new accounts. And now you start shifting money from one platform to another. I quite often hear financial institutions say, we verify names on direct deposits that we get. That's amazing. If you have a name verification and both of the name checks out from the person who sends the money in to your account owner, that tells you that the person who operates the accounts on both ends is the same person, but it doesn't let you know that this identity is not compromised. So I would like to dig a bit deeper and ask your insights on why it's impossible only to rely on KYC, right? So if you do a KYC and you want to authenticate someone's identity, how is, as a standalone product, KYC is not helpful to prevent fraud?
So it is and it isn't, right? Because there are always use cases that we can draw where it is powerful. However, you and I are on the same boat when we talk about, as fraudsters shift over to identity information, it's losing its value. It will lose its value very quickly. And here's what I say as to why. As you said earlier, we look at a single transaction and we see whether or not it's something that should be honored based on the relationships to data around it. Okay. Then on the merchant platform or in a financial institution, we extend out and we say, okay, well, relative to the single account, each one of those transactions, whether it's account creation, login for ATOs, whether it's customer service, whether it's claims and chargebacks, whatever it might be, any way that someone interacts, we always, if we're verifying who the person is when they interact with our platform, we're checking it against the central identity that has been aggregated over time, and we check its performance over time, and we say whether or not, based on that, whether or not we should let this request go through. Here's why. What I say is the reason why KYC is going to get thrown on its head when it comes to fraudsters leveraging identity information further is all of these transactions across all of these different accounts are always tied up to this singular identity and its performance over time. I know firsthand how easy it is to associate new data points to that central ID that have positive performance across the network. I call it data injection. It's been called data poisoning, all these different things where data points that I control, whether it's email address, a phone number, a physical address, or any one of these different things, is associated with that core identity before ever attempting to create a new account or enact a new transaction. Because of that, I feel that this heavy leverage, I feel that the importance of unidirectional KYC is going to be put at it's going to be stressed to its limits, right? And that would be my response. All of our fraud prevention currently tries to tie accounts and transactions to the performance of a central identity. As fraudsters catch up to where I was almost a decade ago, they're going to see how easy it is to inject positive performing data points to that central identity, thus effectively nullifying that whole dynamic.
Absolutely. Guys, I hope you are taking notes because this is gold. I started saying a few months ago, and I actually got mixed response on my statement. I say that the KYC boom that we saw from 2013 ended in 2023. I think the KYC industry came a long way, and the products that they have today are amazing. But it's so much you can continue to develop in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that the KYC boom ended in 2023, and in 2024 we started a new boom, which is the consortium boom, a global network sharing. How we letting other financial institutions know that I found a fraud, I can tell you what type of fraud it is, and have all the other members of the consortium visibility to that. But this is a completely different topic. I want to understand from you a bit, Alexander, on maybe if you can share some examples how you used to conduct fraud and account takeovers for our listeners.
Sure. So I'll quickly glaze over the number one that's been at the top of our minds by volume, which is what I call a linear approach. So all fraud methods, I feel, fit into a framework of three categories. There's linear approaches, there's multi-touch, and there's multi-system. So the linear approach to achieve an ATO, you get compromised login details, someone's Netflix account, they use the same username and password on their bank account. They try to log in and they get access. Now, thankfully, a lot of financial institutions have put different step-up verifications in place. So it's not necessarily that easy, but it is easy enough, right? When you consider the entire landscape of bank accounts, everyone down to the neighborhood credit union, all the way up to your tier ones, there are enough that these credential stuffing attacks, get the information, type it in, will work for it to still be a concern. So that's one, a linear approach. Get the information, type it in, you use it. Cool. The second approach that I would call a multi-touch exploit is where the user aggregates the profile information for a central identity. They go to Spokio and been verified, and they sign up to all these data aggregators, and they populate enough information to satisfy KBVs, the knowledge-based verification questions at customer service. So then the fraudster calls into customer service. They anticipate being asked specific questions. They answer the questions because they have the information. They reset access, and bada bing, bada boom, they have access to the account. That's multi-touch. Multi-system is, I think, the one that you and I had the most fun talking about, where a central identity is aggregated into a profile well enough to go establish a new profile off platform. This can be an investment portfolio. This can be an iGaming platform profile or account. This could be another bank. This can be a credit union. It can be a number of different flavors of accounts. But effectively, all a fraudster needs is a bucket to transfer funds into. And unfortunately, the micro deposit verification process is still in play many different places, right? I've experienced it on my own with my own accounts. Micro deposits are still very prominent across the board. Well, what I used to do is I would make the new platform account, same name, different name, it really doesn't matter, but get to the point where you can make a request against the established account, call in, and you either give the last four of the social security number, the billing zip, or the PIN number. And if you have one of those three, if you have the element that they ask for, you get access to the transaction history. Well, if they're only verifying the micro deposits to verify authority to an account, and a fraudster calls in and has the transaction history read off to them, they're going to verify the micro deposits and thus verify authority to the established account. And it's at that point that I used to track the transaction behavior even further and make transfers out of the established account and into the third-party account over and over and over. And it was a slow drain that resulted in a lot of losses. So to summarize, there's the 3 attempts. There's the linear approach, where login information is copied and pasted from a breach, and it gives them access to an account. There's the multi-touch, where fraudsters anticipate satisfying knowledge-based verification questions at customer service before resetting access to the account, going in and doing what they do. And then the third one is leveraging an established account and an established profile to go open up a third-party platform, transfer funds in between, and then off into another 5 or 6 different layers of mule accounts.
That's amazing. And I think to your last point, we saw it a lot in the fintech space, where you have those brand new fintechs. And at the end of the day, fintech is a company that takes an existing payment trail and make it more convenient, right? They're not reinventing the wheel. So we have all those fintech companies who will allow customers to open accounts, but then the activity that we see on those accounts doesn't make sense. And I always say, if you are building a financial tech company, if your product team doesn't speak with your risk team, and there is no common language of what do we expect from our genuine users, what type of adoption we expect, what type of deposits we expect to see, what type of spend we expect to see, you probably end up with a lot of mule accounts who just bring money in, take the money out, use you as a tool, use you as a pipe to move money from point A to point B, and there's no real way for you to actually detect those. And this is a great insight. The other point that I really like about your approach to fraud is when you mentioned in the multi-touch system, when you call the customer service and you actually being able to verify yourself as the customer. Now, here comes to point where if I had to bet my money on, I would say 80% of financial institutions don't take that into account when they monitor account activity. So if your original customer never calls to the customer service and suddenly you get a call and it verifies perfectly, that should raise a race flag. Which leads us to the next topic that I want to chat with you today is what are good tactics to detect account takeover? So we understand that monitoring the transaction is not helpful. It's not good enough, right? We need to take into consideration non-transactional events. Can you give the listeners any tips or tricks how to build a good account takeover strategy to monitor?
So there are, okay, so if we build onto the the example that I gave earlier, where fraudsters are able to manipulate the identity and the performance of that central identity in any way that they want before striking down on a target platform. What I feel are most important, actually, I've given this a lot of thought, the way that banks, financial institutions, the whole umbrella would stop me is by taking the power out of my hands. And so what does that mean, right? When I can interact with your platform and anticipate every request that your platform makes against different, if I make a request to your platform and I experience being shut down because of this was wrong, or because I need to satisfy this biometric check, or I need to satisfy this OTP. You and I were talking about this before. I anticipate failure 10 times, and I will use that as kind of research. I will anticipate losing, and the platform is going to say, cool, we stopped him at account A, we stopped him at account B, we stopped him at account C. Well, that whole time I was learning. What questions do they ask? What kind of step-up verifications are on the back end? And I'm sacrificing low-level accounts while I do this information gathering, and then finally get the last one. Now, the thing that takes the power away from me is what I call passive data sets. And one example of it is the transaction analysis. We know how this account typically transacts. We know what their behavior looks like. Well, now let's extend onto that. We know that's not enough, so we need to extend out. When do they interact with this platform? How do they interact with the platform? If they, like you just said, if they never call into customer service and all of a sudden they're calling the phone access system, if I was calling in to get transaction information, I was calling in 3 or 4 times, or we're resetting it and listening and writing and making notes. But the real user never did that. Well, that's suspicious behavior, and it's the first time they did it. Everyone accesses it on their app. Someone calling in to hear the transaction history should be a red flag in itself. When do they interact with the platform? How do they interact with the platform? What device do they use? What are their spending behaviors? Is this newly associated account something that we should trust only because it was verified? All of these different data points, not only are they passive, which benefits our users because they're not hit with OTPs and step ups and all this different stuff, but in addition to that, me as a fraudster, I don't know. If I have a list of 1,000 profiles, I don't know how this user interacts. I don't know what their spending behaviors are until I access their transaction history. I'm not going to go through the work to mimic their behaviors, mimic their device, mimic their spending behaviors, mimic all of these things. And even if I was going to go through the work, how would I know when they're interacting with the platform and what pages they're loading and what their typical behaviors like? So there are so many examples of passive data, of leveraging passive data that serves those dual purposes. It's low friction for your users, and it takes the power away from someone like me. And I'll reinforce it by saying anything that a platform asks for from the user, a fraudster can provide. Look all the way back to when they were asking for social security numbers. Everyone should protect their social security number, but they didn't. Well, now we got to step up. We got to dual verify. So now we'll set up an OTP. Well, now we got to triple verify. Let's make a username and password that has these requirements. Well, now let's quadruple verify and check against the performance of the network. Fraudsters have been submitting everything we ask for. And then in the last few years, we saw voice biometrics and facial biometrics checks come in. Fraudsters have successfully submitted the answers to our requests. They will meet all of the requests that we set up for them. We need to move into something passive to be more effective.
This is great. This is awesome insight. And I love it for the comment that you made about learning and sacrificing low value accounts. If you have an account takeover prevention strategy today, and all you do at the bank level is clapping your hands each time you prevent an ATO, if you don't cross-match all the ATO attempts that you successfully stopped, and you don't understand, okay, there's something common between those 20, 30, 40 accounts, you're not learning, you're not doing it right. The other part is, I always say, when I need to simplify it to folks, what is account takeover? Account is a door. Both the bank and the customer want to keep it closed. The bank knows the unique key the customer always used to open that door. The fraudster doesn't know what that key is. You have to keep the fraudster guessing what is that key. Because if they understand the key, they will open the door. And thank you so much for all the insights. This is gold. This is literally gold. And if you are dealing with account takeovers today, I hope that the insights that Alexander provided are very useful to you. But I think with the time limits we have today, this is all what we have. I would invite you to go into unit21.ai and subscribe to our blogs. We call it the Fraud Files. And the Fraud Files blogs is content that I try to post at least on a weekly basis, where we use our global data among all of our customers and share very interesting fraud insights with our readers. So I definitely would love to see you downloading this blog, and always feel free to drop me a comment on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to engage with you if you have any questions. Thank you so much, Alexander.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Alex and Alexander, great session. I totally agree about the blog post. I love reading Alex's insights and really just tremendous stuff all the way around, with like some really practical tips here around account takeover. But more than that, it's super fascinating to hear some of the different ways that fraudsters are perpetrating account takeover, from some simple things to some more complex tactics. So we really appreciate it. Well, a few things to kind of close up here. In about 5 minutes, we have 3 more sessions you could choose from. We have one on pig butchering scams, one on fin crime trends with a whole bunch of AML compliance LinkedIn influencers, And we also have a rule building masterclass. So if you want some practical tips on how to write rules, it's a great session. Also, if you want to learn more about fraud prevention with Unit 21, particularly around stopping account takeover, we have a really great demo over in the Showcase Lounge, where we've got the link right below here that you can click into to get over there and watch Unit 21 in action. And last but not least, give one more commercial plug for it here. We are in the midst of data gathering for our 3rd annual State of Fraud and AML report, and we need your help. So if you can scan this QR code, take about 5 minutes today, plug in some of the data. One interesting thing, I've been peeking at some of the early results that are coming in. Account takeover across banks, credit unions, fintechs, crypto, everybody, it's number one. It's the number one choice so far. So hopefully I didn't just poison any of your survey results there, but it's definitely topical and hot topic. We'll be publishing this report in Q3, and would just again really appreciate any help you can give to support the survey. Well, with that, we'll bid you all adieu, and we'll see you all in the next session. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.